Hello, everyone. Today we're going to discuss a story that could be called a historical blockbuster, Russia in 1917, from the democratic carnival of the February Revolution to the power grab drama of the October Revolution. This wasn't just an ordinary dynastic change, but a story filled with conspiracy, twists, and unexpected endings. You thought Russians overthrowing the Tsar would bring democracy? Wrong. A man named Lenin, with his four-step power grab, crushed the democratic dream. How many secrets were hidden behind this? Was Lenin a savior or a German lackey? Don't blink, as we're about to travel back in time to show you a different perspective on world history. In February 1917, according to the Russian calendar, or early March by our calendar, Russians ignited a revolutionary celebration. On the streets of Petrograd, workers were on strike, soldiers were mutinying, and bakeries were completely looted. Tsar Nicholas II hadn't even realized what was happening before his throne was gone. The 300-year-old Romanov dynasty just went whoosh, game over. The intellectuals of the time were absolutely thrilled. They stood in the streets, waving their fists, shouting, "Long live freedom," with stars in their eyes. They firmly believed that by completing the democratic four-step, electing representatives, establishing a constitution, forming a government, and allowing political parties to alternate power, Russia could transform into Europe's new democratic star. Sounds wonderful, right? But hold on, the show hasn't even started yet, and the real spoiler king was already on his way. You thought the revolution's success meant everything was fine? Just wait and see how one man turned this party into a thriller after his return. On April 3rd, 1917, a mysterious sealed train quietly stopped at Finland Station in Petrograd. When the door opened, a man wearing a felt hat with piercing eyes stepped out. Yes, this was Lenin, the big boss of the Bolsheviks. Today's history books all say that crowds gathered and applause thundered when he returned, as if he were a superstar. But what was the truth? What greeted him on the streets wasn't flowers and cheers, but a city full of insults. German dog. Traitor. Go back to Germany. Why? Because Russia was fighting a life-or-death battle with Germany at the time. Yet Lenin returned on a German train with German money in his pockets. Russians looked at this and thought, isn't he just a traitor? The slogan to bring him down became the hottest background music on the streets in April. But who was Lenin? He didn't care about these discordant voices at all. Standing on the train carriage, he waved his hand, shouted, "Workers of the world, unite!" and then got off the train to start working. This man not only had thick skin, but he was also incredibly clever. What he wanted to do was bigger than what anyone else imagined, big enough to turn Russia completely upside down. How did a man denounced as a traitor become the people's savior just 6 months later? His secret weapon is about to be revealed. After the February Revolution, the Tsar fell, and the provisional government took over this mess. Russia at that time was like a broken car, wheels falling off, fuel tank leaking, drifting in a storm. The provisional government had to solve three major problems: land, peace, and constitution. Which one wasn't a hot potato? The land issue. Farmers hadn't received land for hundreds of years and were desperate. The peace issue. World War I had left corpses strewn across the front lines and starvation in the rear. The constitutional issue. Without a constitution, there was no legitimacy, and the government was just a temporary worker. They thought solving the constitution was most important, since only with a constitution could the country get on the right track. But the problem was that making a constitution requires meetings, arguments, and debates. How could that be done in a day? The provisional government's slow pace was like leisurely repairing a boat in a storm. Before the boat was fixed, it was already leaking below. And at this time, Lenin and his Bolsheviks were quietly sharpening their knives. While the provisional government was busy fixing the boat, Lenin was preparing to capsize it. How did he use 4 moves to steal Russia? From April to October 1917, in just 6 months, Lenin and the Bolsheviks staged a comeback from the brink. They didn't rely on luck, but used the four-step power grab, inciting workers, distributing land to peasants, winning over soldiers, and pretending to hold elections. These 4 steps were executed so precisely and ruthlessly that the provisional government hadn't even realized what happened before power was gone. After returning to Russia, Lenin's first move was to control public opinion. He targeted Pravda, a small newspaper with a circulation of only 8,000 in March, as weak as a roadside stand. But with German sugar daddy backing him and personally taking charge, after 1 month, circulation soared to 85,000, becoming Russia's biggest traffic king. Pravda shouted daily, "Workers need higher wages. Capitalists are bloodsuckers. Take up arms and eliminate the exploiters." How exciting these words sounded. When Petrograd's workers heard this, they immediately stopped working and spent their days marching, singing revolutionary songs, and casually looting shops and factories. The order that had barely stabilized after the Tsar's fall completely turned into chaos. With the economy already crippled by the war, workers realized the Bolsheviks were right. Time for revolution. How did a newspaper become an igniter? Workers marching and looting stores. What was Lenin's next step? The land issue was Russia's old chronic problem. After centuries of serfdom, peasants' desire for land was stronger than anything. After the February Revolution, the provisional government said they would distribute land, but it would be compensated redemption, not seizure. This sounded fair, but peasants couldn't wait. They wanted land now. Pravda fired again. "Peasants, take the land yourselves." Revolutionary justice for landlords who resist. From May 1917, peasants across the country took action, seizing land, beating landlords, burning estates, with many wealthy farmers beaten to death. Rural order collapsed, and the Bolsheviks seized the opportunity to infiltrate, spreading their influence from cities to villages. While peasants were frantically seizing land and the provisional government was dumbfounded, Lenin's next move was even more ruthless. In June 1917, the Russian army launched an offensive on the Eastern Front, but the result couldn't have been more disastrous. 400,000 men killed, wounded, or captured, and the front line retreated over 100 kilometers. The provisional government's face was swollen from the beating, and soldiers exploded in anger. "Why keep fighting? Let's go home." Mutinies and desertions occurred one after another. The Bolsheviks seized the opportunity to shout, "We want peace! No more war!" They also said all the Tsar's officers should be purged. For example, in the Kronstadt incident, sailors killed more than 120 officers, and Bolshevik people took their positions. By August 21st, the front line collapsed again, and there was a major military reshuffle. The Bolsheviks infiltrated Petrograd's army and seized control of the guns. With soldiers refusing to fight, officers killed, and guns in Lenin's hands, what step was he still missing? A constitution had been Russia's century-old dream. The provisional government was busy setting up the election framework, compiling voter registries, and learning from the West to establish laws. In June, the first Congress of Soviets met, where the Mensheviks and Socialist Revolutionaries won 533 seats, while the Bolsheviks only got 105. They had no chance in parliament. But Lenin contemptuously said, "A constitution is just a piece of paper." On June 18th, the Mensheviks somehow got the Bolsheviks to join a demonstration, turning Petrograd into chaos with 400,000 people. On July 3rd, the July Days demonstration played out again, and journalist Sukhanov prophetically said, "The Bolsheviks are about to revolt." Sure enough, on October 24th, the Bolsheviks surrounded the Winter Palace with 10,000 sailors and 11 warships, capturing government officials. At 10 a.m. on October 25th, Lenin issued a statement to citizens. "The government is gone. Power belongs to us." He also pretended there would be another election. Before the elections had even begun, the government was gone. How fake was Lenin's fake election? On November 12, 1917, Russia held its largest-scale election ever, with 65% of the population voting. The result? Out of 703 seats, the Socialist Revolutionaries won 410 and the Bolsheviks 163. By the rules, the Socialist Revolutionaries should have formed the government. But on January 5, 1918, as soon as the Constituent Assembly opened, Lenin declared martial law and troops stormed in to dissolve the assembly, arresting many representatives. Writer Maxim Gorky was so angry, he wrote, Lenin used gun barrels to shatter Russia's century-old dream. From then on, the Bolsheviks called the shots. Votes? They didn't exist anymore. elections became a mere formality. How did Lenin dare to do this? He didn't used to think this way. In 1905, Lenin wrote in his book, "Russian workers suffer not from capitalism, but from capitalism's underdevelopment." He thought at the time that capitalism needed to develop first before workers could rise up. But by 1917, how did he completely change, directly seizing power through violence? Trotsky later suggestively said, Ilyich Lenin woke up from his dream. Whether he woke up or not, we don't know. But in 6 months, Lenin dragged Russia from the edge of democracy into a red abyss. Was he a genius or a devil? I'll leave that for you to judge. That's the end of today's story. Wasn't Lenin's four-step power grab more thrilling than a TV drama? Want to know more secrets behind history? Remember to like and follow, and we'll see you next time.